Hi guys and welcome back. So we just looked at how to extract data from a form into a controller by using the request. And what about how you can validate your form? So we'll just go back here. For example, if you have this form, you may want to require that your name is required, the type here is email, the message is required. You can normally do that in HTML, and in HTML you can do that by going to the form and saying using the attribute required, right? So you want to use this attribute required, you can use the attribute required here. And this is very beautifully done and validated at the level of HTML. So if I attempt to submit this form, it tells me to fill out this. And if I fill this out and I submit this, it tells me to fill this out. I fill this. And I cannot still submit because it's supposed to be an email. And then I can also not submit here until I fill this out. And then we have this. But then it is not sufficient to just validate it at the level of the client, because there are various bots that can make requests to your endpoints. And it will be important for you to validate your request at the level also of the controller. So you have done what is called here basic client-side validation by using the required attributes and other attributes. Now we want to do similar thing at the level of our Laravel code, which can be done in our controller. And Laravel ships out of the box with a very interesting feature, which is for request validation. I'm going to remove this to keep our code nice and clean. So the way you validate Laravel, there are a couple of ways, but I'm going to start with the most basic and then I'll move to another more advanced approach, which is industry recommended. So to validate your request, you say the request validate, right? And a request validate takes an array. So this request validate takes an array. So this array, it comprises of a key value pair, and the key is the name attribute and the value is the validation rule. So I'll take, for example, name, right? This name is pertaining to this name, right? So the name here, the name of the person, what can we validate the name of the person as? The first rule is it is required, right? And it is required, right? It should be a string. And maybe you want a minimum of, let's say, 5. So what we're saying here is the name attribute must be it's required. It should be a string and it's a minimum of 5 characters, right? So another part is email. So for email, it is a required field, right? And then it's of type email. So for this one, we'll keep it nice and simple. And then we have message. It is a required field and it is a string, right? And it's a minimum of, let's say, 10. So this is how we write our validation rules for Laravel. You have the field name and then the various rules. The rule, is it the required? Is it a string? Is it a minimum of that? We could also look at this. So if I save this particular file, right, and I come here, I refresh this, I submit, let's say, a name of, let's say, me, and the email is this and something.do, and then short like this. You see that it redirects me back here because the validation rule has held it. So in the next tutorial, I'll show you how you can actually display the errors of the validation on this page. And if you're also looking at where can you know more about these validation rules, if you go to laravel.com, Laravel's official website, you go to the documentation, you look at validation, right? So if you go to validation, you will see the rules. All of the rules are well displayed. Scroll down. So these are the rules. So if you look at the rules, it says available validation rules, accepted. Accepted is active URL. So if you want to validate that it's an active URL, you can use this. If you want to validate it's an array, you can validate that it's an ASCII. So Laravel ships with a lot of validation rules that gives you the capacity to validate your forms effectively without having to rewrite them. Again, you can also rewrite your custom validation rules. Laravel provides provision for that. But in the most basic cases, one or more of these rules can be used and it's going to work as needed. So you can read more about the validation rules, and in the next video we're going to show how you can show the errors of the validation on the form.